This black boy who once worked as a shoe shiner was rejected from entering a bank, but he ended up buying the whole bank and made it mandatory for everyone to salute him. It's 1965 in Washington, D.C., and our protagonist Bernard is asked to be careful because they want to make an example out of him. He then enters a courtroom and prepares to testify. It all started in Texas in 1939 when Bernard was just a child. He worked as a shoe shiner outside a bank but had a hidden motive. He would listen to all the customers' conversations about finances and real estate investing, writing every bit of information in his notebook. One day, while eavesdropping through a bank window, a cop sees him and tries to catch him, but Bernard manages to escape. However, the cop informs Bernard's father. His father scolds him, warning that white men will never let him make money, but is still impressed when he sees the information Bernard has gathered over time. However, Bernard is stubborn and promises his father that he will make a lot of money. The scene then cuts to Los Angeles in 1954. Bernard is now an adult, living with his wife Eunice and their 2-year-old son. They visit Eunice's family, and over dinner, her uncle shares that an airline company is hiring black men. But Bernard turns down the offer, revealing his real plan: to earn money through real estate. He dreams of buying property and earning rental income. The uncle becomes angry, as the family is barely surviving while renting a small shed. He thinks Bernard just doesn't want to work. Later, Eunice assures her uncle that Bernard is a genius and is serious about his goals. She returns to the shed with Bernard, and he promises her that better days are coming. The very next day, Bernard takes Eunice's cousin Tony for some work. Tony's friend Matt is also there, and he's impressed by Bernard's car. Tony tells him Bernard owns a few buildings. Later, Bernard visits some buildings in a white neighborhood to check their condition and prices. When he's back with his wife, he tells her he's found the perfect property. But buying it would mean they'd have no money left for renovations. To solve this, they need a co-investor. Eunice introduces Bernard to Joe, her ex-boss. They visit Joe, but Joe jokes around and doesn't take things seriously. Bernard decides not to work with him. They leave without pitching the idea, but before driving away, Bernard sees the governor visiting Joe. Apparently, they're friends. Still, it doesn't change Bernard's mind. Later, Bernard visits Patrick, the owner of the building he wants to buy. He asks for a $10,000 loan if he buys the building. Patrick refuses and shows Bernard some calculations to explain why it's a bad deal. But Bernard finds an error in Patrick's math and corrects it on the spot, impressing him. Even so, Patrick doesn't agree to the loan. Before leaving, Bernard notices a calendar from Reed at Mid-City Bank. He decides to visit the bank and asks to meet Reed, but the assistant lies and says Reed is busy, even though Bernard clearly sees he isn't. It's obvious they're discriminating against him. Bernard decides to wait outside the bank. Eventually, Reed leaves for home, and Bernard seizes the opportunity to pitch him a business idea that would benefit them both. That night, Bernard tells Eunice he didn't get the loan. But just then, Patrick calls. He knows Bernard used his name in front of Reed. Patrick asks if Bernard thinks what he did was part of normal business customs. Bernard says no. Patrick, who appreciates people who don't follow the rules, is even more impressed. After much convincing, Patrick agrees and tells Bernard to visit the bank in the morning. He'll get the loan in Patrick's name. That night, Eunice and Bernard go to a club to celebrate. But Joe is there again and keeps teasing Bernard, which only makes Bernard like him even less. The next day, Bernard and Tony are working on renovations. But just then, an older white lady who is a tenant in the building calls them out for being in the neighborhood. Bernard proudly tells her he's the building's owner, but she doesn't believe him. Matt arrives and Bernard asks if he's okay working for a black man. Matt cleverly replies, "The only color that matters to me is money green." They all work through the day, but suddenly 2 cops show up. The lady had reported suspicious black men working in the building. Bernard shows them the ownership paperwork, and the cops leave. After renovations, Bernard moves his family into one of the apartments. Seeing this, the old lady moves out, refusing to live next to a black family. But what happens next will shock you. With Bernard now the owner, more black tenants move in. Soon the building is fully leased. Patrick is impressed and offers Bernard a partnership. Bernard picks the buildings and Patrick acts as the face so that white families are more likely to move in. They agree on a 50-50 split, and over the next few weeks, their business booms. Matt and Tony help with renovations, while Eunice helps with decor. One day, Bernard takes Eunice to a huge house and asks for decorating advice, then reveals it's their new home. Time passes. One night, Patrick dies in his sleep. After the funeral, his wife announces she wants to end the business. She offers Bernard only 25%, even though he owns 50%. Because his name isn't on the paperwork, he's forced to accept unless he can get a witness. Bernard visits Reed again to get him as a witness, but Reed refuses to meet him. On his way out, Bernard notices how much space the bank needs. He then reluctantly visits Joe with an idea: buy the building the bank is in. Since the bank is desperate for space, they won't reject loans anymore. Joe likes the idea but says no one will sell a building to a black man, so they hire Matt to be the front. He initially refuses, unsure of himself. Later, while at a restaurant, a waitress named Susie encourages Matt, and her support convinces him to accept the offer. His first lesson is learning how to interact with rich people. The group visits a golf course. There, they meet Joe's banker friend Donald, who agrees to loan $2 million. Later, Bernard teaches Matt all the calculations needed for the deal. Weeks pass. Matt practices golf and finance. He struggles at first, but eventually gets better. He ends up nailing a hole-in-one and acing the financial calculations. Next, Joe teaches him how to drink and dress, and Eunice teaches him table manners. Finally, the men decide he's ready. The building is owned by a man named Charles, who plays golf at an exclusive club. Matt gets in as a guest, and Joe pretends to be his driver to make him look rich. Matt impresses everyone with his golf skills and arranges a meeting with Charles. Bernard and Joe coach him for a week, and Matt nails the pitch, buying the building for $1.56 million. The group celebrates and redecorates the building. Reed is stunned to see Bernard there. Soon, their business soars. They now own many buildings in rich white neighborhoods. Meanwhile, Matt marries Susie. They even meet the vice president. It's now 1963. Bernard visits his hometown and meets his father, who says he's really proud of him. He takes his son to the same bank where he once shined shoes. He sees another boy working there and gets an idea. Back in LA, he proposes buying the Texas bank. Joe resists, saying they know nothing about banking. But Bernard convinces him. They buy the bank in Matt's name, and as a part of the deal, the previous owner and his son, Robert, still receive 20% of the interest. Under Bernard's leadership, the bank gives out loans to black families, and their businesses flourish. Robert notices the number of loans the bank has been giving and confronts Matt, who dodges the question. Robert begins tailing him and finds out Bernard is behind it all. He photographs Matt and Bernard together. That night, Matt returns home, and Susie complains that he is still getting a salary when he was promised partnership. Later, Robert visits Bernard and the group and tells them he doesn't have a problem working for black men and is here to warn them. The U.S. Treasury Department is inspecting the bank in a month due to complaints of unsafe loans. Matt proposes buying a smaller bank to split loans and reduce suspicion. Bernard and Joe are hesitant, but Matt threatens to leave, so they reluctantly agree. Later, they end up buying the small bank. Later, Robert calls Matt and says some white clients want to pull their money, fearing the bank is black-owned. That night, Bernard tells Joe that 5 people already withdrew, and 9 stayed, likely convinced by Robert. Joe thinks it's Robert who caused the panic in the first place. Later, a federal officer visits for inspection. Matt calls Bernard for help, and Bernard, dressed as a janitor, tries to help Matt with gestures. But the officer shuts the door for privacy, so Bernard can't listen to their conversation anymore. Panicking, Matt messes up his story. He rushes to the bathroom for help, but when he returns back, it's too late. The officer has found several errors in the files. Matt goes back to the bathroom with the files, and Joe wonders how Donald could have made those mistakes. And just then, Matt admits that he let someone else handle part of the process, on Robert's recommendation. It was a setup. They must now sell 27 bad loans, losing $320,000. In a meeting, Bernard and Joe tell Matt they can't help anymore. He chose to buy the bank. He must handle it. The next morning, Donald tells Joe that his bank bought Matt's loans. Joe and Bernard rush to Matt's office in anger, and Matt says it's just temporary. But just then, Treasury agents arrive and announce that they have lost their license, fire Matt, and shut down the bank. Just as everyone gets out, some FBI agents arrive and arrest Bernard and Joe. Bernard tries to resist, saying they are discriminating, but the agents easily overpower him. Later, a lawyer informs them that state charges are dropped, but federal ones remain. There's a senator in Arkansas who might help. On the other hand, Matt, who is still in trouble, is offered a deal by the government: testify against his friends in exchange for immunity or go to prison. When he goes to testify, he says that he was just an employee and was asked to do everything by Bernard and Joe. Bernard now has 2 options: admit to bending rules and get immunity, or tell the truth and risk prison. He talks to Eunice about the matter, who supports whatever decision he makes. In court, when it's Bernard's turn, he says that the Constitution of America promises equality, but the law doesn't. He stands up and takes out a janitor's uniform and says, if a black man can't get a loan, how can he start a business, buy a home, or live the American dream? As a result, they lose everything they had. All their buildings are seized and they are sentenced to 3 years in prison. Only one house remains that is in Eunice's name. 3 years have passed and Bernard and Joe are released, but Eunice finds them laughing. When asked why they are laughing, they reveal that they told Matt to testify against them so he could avoid 50 years in prison. In return, Matt secretly bought them 2 houses in the Bahamas before the government froze their assets. Because of Bernard's brave testimony, the government passed the Fair Housing Act, making it illegal to discriminate based on race, religion, or gender. Like and subscribe for more recaps like this.